Qantas has just announced it will cut at least 6,000 jobs across all parts of the business. The airline also says 15,000 employees will continue to be stood down, particularly those associated with its international operations. 6 of its remaining 747 aircraft will be retired immediately. And we'll have more on this story shortly with our senior business correspondent, Peter Ryan. But just continuing on with this for the moment, because this statement has only just come through and it's going to affect so many people. There are probably Qantas employees watching this now and keen to get as much information as possible. So in this statement from Qantas, it's just released, it says impact on our people. The actions we must take will have a huge impact on thousands of our people. This is something that weighs heavily on all of us, but the collapse of billions of dollars in revenue leaves us little choice if we're to save as many jobs as possible long term. Many of the 6,000 job losses that we're announcing today are people who have spent decades here. It's not unusual to have several members of the one family working at Qantas and Jetstar. What makes this even harder is that right before the crisis hit, we were actively recruiting. We were gearing up for Project Sunrise. We were getting ready to buy planes. Now we're facing a sudden reversal of fortune that is no one's fault, but is very hard to accept. Across the world, airlines are shrinking by up to 50%. To avoid anything on this scale, we will be extending the stand down for a large number of our people as we wait for the recovery we know is coming. Separate to job losses, those 6,000 job losses, about 15,000 people will remain stood down for some time. People for whom we have no work now, but will in future. Around half of those stood down will be back flying domestically, we think, by the end of the year. The remainder, mostly those supporting international flying, will return more slowly. Thousands of Qantas and Jetstar people have already found secondary employment during stand down, and the feedback from those employers is incredibly positive. So that's part of this statement that has just been released by Qantas. It's really tough news. The tough news just keeps coming through this COVID crisis in so many sectors of the Australian economy. But just repeating that news, Qantas announcing that 6,000 jobs will be lost. And we've got our business correspondent, Peter Ryan, joining us now. Peter, just take us through what you know of this.
Well, good morning, Joe. This news has just hit. It's been released by Qantas onto the share market. The predictions about this have been circulating for some time, but this morning Qantas Chief Executive Alan Joyce has confirmed it, that there will be 6,000 staff at Qantas who will be made permanently redundant or will lose their jobs. These are out of the 20,000 or so Qantas staff who have already been stood down as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So for some context, even before the crisis, Qantas had flagged the need to lose certain members of its workforce or a big chunk of its workforce. But really the COVID-19 crisis means that, according to what Alan Joyce is saying this morning, it could take 3 years for global airlines like Qantas to recover. And we haven't seen a significant return to domestic flights in Australia. International flights are stranded. The big money-making business for airlines at the moment is freight. Passengers aren't flying. We don't have a vaccine for the coronavirus. There are serious restrictions all around the world and in Australia. And of course, in Victoria, second wave outbreaks are causing a lot of concern. So this is the hard decision that Qantas has made this morning. Yeah.
And what's it? Talk us through the suggestion about the 15,000 on JobKeeper and the suggestion that a lot of people will be able to come back eventually.
Well, eventually, that's the whole, plan with JobKeeper, which begins to be phased out at the end of September. Qantas is working very hard and has a lot of hope that domestic flights will return at some point. Just last week or the week before, we saw that Qantas was rolling out $19 fares on Jetstar. So this is really, Qantas preparing for a return of the economy, a reopening of the economy, resumption of travel and trade. And of course, this is all, very tenuous and uncertain, given that states like Queensland and South Australia and Western Australia remain quite concerned about reopening their borders, and of course anyone travelling needing to go into quarantine. So that level of uncertainty is there. Alan Joyce said a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that Qantas had the ability to ride this crisis out, and they could burn $41 million in cash every month until December 2021. But really, that's a short window in terms of aviation. And as Alan Joyce has said in this morning's release, the international aviation body, IATA, has said that it could take 3 years for global aviation to crawl out of this crisis. And even now, we don't have any sign of a vaccine on the horizon.
And how's this as an indication on how tough it's going to be for Virgin to get back up flying?
Well, it makes it very hard for Virgin. Of course, we're getting down to a decision on which of the individual bidders, Bain Capital or Cyrus Capital, whether they will be the successful bidders. But of course, for this to be attractive, those bidders have to have a prospect of being able to make money or to recapitalise the airline and to get institutions around the world to think that it's a safe bet to get back into Virgin. But of course, that's in a very, very dire situation. And of course, Virgin staff are also on JobKeeper. The hope is that Virgin will be sold to one of those two remaining equity bidders. A final bid or winner is expected to be announced next week. But of course, if that doesn't happen for some reason and Virgin has to go into liquidation, the taxpayer will be exposed, because I think there's something like $500 million in worker entitlements that the federal government would have to fund under their scheme to protect worker entitlements. So while the federal government was reluctant to provide a $1 billion lifeline to Virgin, they will be doing whatever they can behind the scenes to ensure that there is a winning bid.
And Peter, just finally, there could be, probably are many Qantas and Jetstar employees watching this right now, wondering what's next. Have we got any indication from Alan Joyce when he's going to be stepping up? Presumably, we're going to be hearing from some key people at Qantas today.
Yes, we'll be hearing from Alan Joyce at the bottom of the hour. He's holding a briefing with journalists and analysts this morning to explain this situation. I mean, Alan Joyce has also announced that the airline has been able to secure a $1.9 billion recapitalisation of Qantas. So that's $1.9 billion going into Qantas from that will be like an equity stake from other holders, and that's the first time in the Qantas history that that's been required. So that those efforts to get that additional cash and equity into Qantas shows how concerned Qantas is about maintaining Qantas as an airline. So it does, as we keep hearing, come out through the other side of this crisis.
Yeah. Peter, so do you understand that that's a kind of media conference at 9:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, or like a conference call? I just am thinking of people who are out there who might be wanting to listen into that.
That will be a media conference call, and
Right.
And I'm sure that analysts will be listening in, and we'll be across that. I'll be listening to that. The ABC will be covering that, as we always do, to get the right questions to Alan Joyce about how this actually ends and how he rolls this out and protects the airline, and also importantly at this time protects staff and ensures that they are that they leave Qantas at a difficult time in the best possible circumstances.
Yeah, okay. Peter Ryan there in Sydney.